When Elizabeth met Emmanuel, it wasn't wealth or looks that drew her in. It was his kindness, humor, and genuine care. Other men had flashier lives, but Emmanuel stood out with his sincerity. He treated her like a queen before she ever became his bride. But Emmanuel carried a silent pain. For years, his romantic relationships ended in rejection because of something he couldn't change. He wasn't well endowed and struggled with performance. Though never said directly, the women he dated left when disappointment settled in. It left him ashamed, trying all sorts of pills, creams, and tricks, hoping to fix what he believed was broken. Nothing worked. By his late 20s, marriage felt out of reach. Then came Elizabeth. He first saw her after church one Sunday, then again at a bus stop, and finally at a wedding. Her warm, honest smile stirred something in him. Despite his fears, he took a chance and introduced himself. She wasn't easily swept away. Elizabeth had her own walls. Many men walked out when she told them she was saving sex for marriage. But Emmanuel didn't. He never pressured, never even hinted. His patience and respect confused her at first. She tested him in small ways, delayed replies, hard questions about purity. But he remained gentle, steady. His calmness, especially around intimacy, was unusual. At first, she wondered if it was an act, but over time, she saw the truth. Emmanuel valued her, not her body. For Emmanuel, her vow of purity was a lifeline. It gave him hope. Maybe this time he wouldn't be rejected. So he gave her his whole heart, praying that his love would be enough, come what may. The morning after. The next morning, Elizabeth sat him down. "We've promised forever, but I need to ask, are you financially ready?" Emmanuel replied honestly, "I may not have everything, but I've been saving. I can take care of us with the right partner." Elizabeth believed him, but she also got to work. She helped him budget, cut waste, and plan wisely. Emmanuel was stunned at how quickly things improved. With her support, he began to dream again. Of a stable home, a future, a family. But even in those joyful moments, the unspoken fear remained. The wedding night would come, and with it, the truth. Elizabeth never pressured him. Her vow of no sex before marriage gave Emmanuel peace and time. Yet, as the wedding approached, the fear of rejection crept in. What if she left him too, once she knew? Still, he held on to her words. "I love you for who you are." That became his anchor. Planning the wedding. Their engagement was filled with joy and purpose. With limited funds, they planned a simple but beautiful ceremony. Elizabeth's wisdom guided every decision. While friends teased her, calling her Madam Soon-to-be, she focused on starting wisely, not impressing anyone. Her practicality earned everyone's respect, especially Emmanuel's. Outwardly, Emmanuel was the happiest groom-to-be. But alone, the fear never left him. He dreaded the wedding night. Old thoughts haunted him. Would she regret marrying him? Would he lose her like before? Yet, every time he saw her smile, his fear softened. He reminded himself that she chose him, for who he was, not for what he feared he lacked. The wedding day. The day arrived with joy and color. Elizabeth walked down the aisle glowing. Emmanuel stood waiting, his heart full, with love, hope, and hidden dread. As she said, "I do," he almost broke down. She had chosen him, truly. At the reception, they laughed and danced like any happy couple. But only Emmanuel knew how heavy the night ahead truly felt. The wedding night. When the celebration ended and they arrived at their modest honeymoon suite, a gentle silence settled between them. Elizabeth sat on the edge of the bed, fingers intertwined, while Emmanuel quietly joined her, the weight of anticipation thick in the room. When he finally reached out, his hands trembled. She responded with shy honesty, confirming what he'd hoped. She truly had waited. The realization overwhelmed him with relief, but the moment wasn't easy for her. The pain was sharp, her body tense. She winced and whispered, "It hurts." "Not yet." Emmanuel froze, heart pounding with fear. Was this the moment she'd pull away, discover his inadequacy? But Elizabeth surprised him. Instead of retreating, She squeezed his hand and asked if they could try again. Slowly, gently. They used lubricant and moved carefully. It was uncomfortable for her, not romantic or perfect, but it was real. When it was over, she rested her head on his chest, breath unsteady. He wrapped his arms around her, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Thank you for trusting me." Her reply came softly, "We promised each other forever. This is just the beginning." That night, as she slept beside him, Emmanuel lay awake, not with shame or fear, but gratitude. For the first time in his life, he felt fully accepted. Early days of marriage. Married life settled in gently. Their small apartment felt alive with laughter, shared chores, and whispered prayers at night. Elizabeth cooked, teased him over his clumsy cleaning, and filled their home with warmth. Emmanuel, in turn, worked to make her happy, fixing things, bringing small gifts, holding her when she was tired. Emmanuel's silent struggle. Though Elizabeth never complained, her gentle requests for more left Emmanuel wounded. Each time she whispered, "Let's go again," or softly asked, "Is it already over?" his heart sank. He smiled on the outside, but inside, the old fears returned. No matter how much he tried, it never felt like enough. Elizabeth was never harsh. She didn't mock or compare. Instead, she masked her longing with tenderness, never wanting to bruise his pride. But Emmanuel could feel it, in her eyes, in the silences afterward. She was left unsatisfied, and he had no answers. At night, lying beside her as she slept on his chest, he would remind himself, "She chose me. She waited. She only knows me." That thought became his comfort, even as his confidence crumbled. Cracks in the quiet. In the early months, Emmanuel hoped things would get better with time. But as Elizabeth's desire grew, so did his insecurity. It wasn't just about lasting longer, it was about his size, and that was something no effort could change. Sometimes, as he tried to enter her, she would whisper absent-mindedly, "Are you in?" She meant no harm, but each word was a blade. He considered trying pills again, ones he'd used years ago without success. This time, a doctor gave him something new, promising better performance. But even with them, nothing changed what he feared most. He wasn't enough. Elizabeth's quiet sacrifice. Elizabeth stayed silent, not out of frustration, but love. She had vowed to stand by him. So, she smiled when he looked at her. She whispered, "Thank you," after each attempt. And though her body longed for more, she buried the ache. Emmanuel knew. He saw it in her eyes, the way she held him with love, even in her emptiness. That made it harder. "The pills don't fix this," he told himself one night. "But she's still here. She still chooses me. I have to fight for us." Withdrawing. What began as shame soon became avoidance. Emmanuel started pulling away, first with excuses of work stress, then with overnight business trips. He told himself he was protecting her from more disappointment. But Elizabeth didn't need distance. She needed her husband. She sat up at night, staring at the ceiling fan, praying silently for him to return to her. Not physically, but emotionally. She missed his laughter, his presence, his companionship. "I can live without satisfaction," she thought one night, "but not without love." Loneliness and Bruno. One afternoon, walking home in the heat of silence, Elizabeth passed a boy selling puppies. One small black and brown pup bounded toward her. She smiled for the first time in weeks and took him home. She named him Bruno. Bruno became her comfort, wagging his tail when she entered the room, curling beside her during prayer, filling the house with a kind of warmth that Emmanuel had left behind. When Emmanuel returned home and saw the puppy, she simply said, "I needed company." He smiled, but inside, the guilt was heavy. Bruno wasn't replacing him. He was filling the silence he'd left behind. Growing apart. Emmanuel thought that by staying away, he was sparing her. But in truth, he was abandoning her. Elizabeth never accused him of anything. She didn't even ask too many questions. But the silence between them grew louder. And each time she lay on the cold side of the bed, whispering, "I just want my husband back," Emmanuel sat alone in a hotel room, staring at the ceiling, not knowing how to return. They were still married, still under one name, but slowly, they were drifting apart. And neither of them yet knew how to bridge the growing gap. A year into the marriage, Elizabeth began to feel the pressure. Not from herself alone, but from the whispers of relatives and the questions from friends. At every family gathering, someone would ask, "So, when are we hearing the cry of a baby?" She would smile politely, but each question felt like a thorn in her heart. One quiet evening after dinner, she sat Emmanuel down in the sitting room. The television hummed softly in the background, but her eyes were fixed on him. "Emmanuel," she began gently, "it's been a year now. I think we should talk about children." Emmanuel shifted uncomfortably, his throat tightening. He had been expecting this conversation, dreading it even. "I don't know what's happening," he said slowly. "You're supposed to be pregnant by now. We've been trying." Elizabeth reached for his hand. "That's why I think maybe we should seek medical help, just to know if everything is all right with us. There's no harm in checking." Emmanuel's resistance. Her suggestion hit him like a wave of shame. Medical help meant tests. Tests meant exposure. Exposure meant his secret, the one he had tried to bury, could come out. The thought terrified him. He forced a small smile and shook his head. "Let's not rush, Elizabeth. Sometimes it takes time. We should wait a little longer and try more. God's time is the best time." Though he tried to sound reassuring, his words carried a tremor of fear. Elizabeth studied him, her heart sinking. She wanted to push, to insist they at least get checked. But his resistance stopped her. He looked fragile in that moment, almost defensive. So she swallowed her words and nodded. "All right, we'll wait," she said softly. But inside, doubt began to grow. The silent wait. The months that followed were heavier than the first year. Each time her monthly flow came, Elizabeth locked herself in the bathroom for a while, wiping her tears before stepping out with a forced smile. She didn't want to add to Emmanuel's burden. Emmanuel, on the other hand, grew quieter. Every time Elizabeth hinted at trying again, his heart filled with both hope and dread. Hope because he longed to be a father. Dread because he feared his inadequacy was the hidden barrier. He told himself, "Maybe it's just delay. Maybe she will conceive soon. If I keep waiting, God will answer." But in the silence of the night, when Elizabeth turned her back to sleep, he whispered to himself, "What if the problem is me? What if I can never give her a child?" And yet, he couldn't bring himself to admit it. Not to her, not even to himself. By the middle of their second year of marriage, Elizabeth's longing for a child grew stronger than her personal discomfort in the bedroom. She was not satisfied with Emmanuel intimately. She couldn't deny that. Many nights ended with her turning to the wall, her body unfulfilled, her heart heavy. But when it came to children, she pushed aside her dissatisfaction. All she wanted was to carry life in her womb, to silence the whispers of relatives, to feel the joy of motherhood. Even if intimacy wasn't what she dreamed, she prayed daily, "Lord, just bless me with a child. That's enough." Secret efforts. Unbeknownst to Emmanuel, Elizabeth began to do things in secret. She visited chemists quietly, buying herbs and fertility boosters recommended by women in her fellowship. She took teas late at night when Emmanuel was asleep, swallowing bitter roots with a grimace, whispering prayers after every sip. She researched online remedies with her small phone, trying everything from strange diets to ovulation tracking apps. She kept journals of her cycles, marking days with hope, then erasing them with tears when her flow arrived. At one point, she even allowed a neighbor's older auntie to massage her belly with warm oil, promising that it would open the womb. Elizabeth endured it all in silence, too ashamed to tell Emmanuel that she was desperate, too afraid to let him know she was no longer content to just wait. After many months of tears, secret remedies, and hushed prayers, Elizabeth finally missed her flow. At first, she thought it was just another false alarm, but when her body began to change, the nausea, the fatigue, the strange cravings, she rushed to a clinic quietly. The nurse's smile told her what her heart had been desperate to hear. She was pregnant. When she broke the news to Emmanuel, he almost collapsed in joy. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her gently around their small sitting room, tears rolling down his face. God has remembered us, Elizabeth. You've made me the happiest man alive. For the first time in years, his shame seemed to vanish. All he saw was the future, a child, a family, proof that he was enough. The pregnancy journey. But the months that followed were not easy. Elizabeth's body grew heavy with the pregnancy, and the discomfort sometimes left her moody and restless. She vomited often in the mornings, slept fitfully at night, and craved odd foods at strange hours. Through it all, Emmanuel tried to be supportive, cooking when he could, rubbing her back when the nausea hit, and praying over her when she cried in frustration. Yet he noticed something that stung him quietly. She leaned more on Bruno, her dog, than on him. Bruno became her shadow. She stroked his fur when she felt sick, talked to him when she was lonely during the day, and sometimes even rested her head against him on the couch. When Emmanuel returned from work, he would often find Bruno curled at her feet while she hummed softly, her hand on her belly. Emmanuel tried to laugh it off. "So now the dog is taking my place, eh?" he joked. But deep down he felt a pang of jealousy. Bruno seemed to receive the attention and affection that he once enjoyed. Approaching delivery. As her due date drew nearer, the household atmosphere shifted. Excitement mingled with tension. Every kick from the baby made Elizabeth smile through her discomfort, while every groan of pain made Emmanuel's heart race with both fear and awe. At night, he lay awake, imagining himself holding their child for the first time. His heart swelled with pride, but also a lingering worry. Would Elizabeth's love for him be renewed through this child, or would the cracks in their intimacy only widen? Elizabeth, meanwhile, focused on the life growing within her. Her back ached, her ankles swelled, but she kept telling herself, "This pain will be worth it when I hear my baby cry." And in those final weeks, even Bruno seemed restless, always circling near her belly, as if he too knew that something new was about to enter their home. The day of delivery arrived with thunderclouds gathering in the sky, as if the heavens themselves sensed what was about to unfold. Elizabeth's cries filled the small hospital room as nurses rushed about, urging her to push. Emmanuel stood by her side, his hand trembling in hers, whispering prayers under his breath. Minutes felt like hours until finally, the shrill cry of a newborn pierced the air. Relief swept through the room, but the joy lasted only a heartbeat. When the nurse lifted the baby into view, the room fell into stunned silence. The child was not like any other. His small body bore human form, but his face carried the unmistakable features of a dog, snout-like, with ears that twitched unnaturally. His hands were tiny, but the claws of an animal tipped his fingers. Elizabeth's scream filled the ward. "No, no! God, what is this?" She turned her face away, tears streaming, while Emmanuel stood frozen, his eyes wide, his voice lost. The husband's shock. When he finally found words, they cracked like glass. "Elizabeth, what happened? What is this?" He wasn't angry at first, he was terrified. He stared at the newborn wrapped in a blanket, his mind refusing to believe what his eyes saw. Elizabeth clutched her chest, weeping uncontrollably. She remembered every secret tea, every herb, every strange massage she had endured behind his back. In that moment, she felt it all had returned to her, the price of desperation, of seeking answers in the shadows. But when Emmanuel pressed her again, his voice breaking, "Tell me the truth, Elizabeth, please." She shook her head, unable to confess. With trembling lips, she whispered, "Not now. I will tell you at the right time." The unspoken wait. The nurses exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. The baby whimpered, its cry caught between human and animal, filling the room with an eerie chill. Emmanuel stood rooted to the ground, staring at the child who was supposed to be his joy but had become a mystery. He looked at his wife, her eyes swollen with tears, her body weak from labor, and he felt torn between anger, pity, and fear. Elizabeth turned her face to the wall, sobbing. In her heart, She knew the moment of truth would come, the moment she would have to confess the secret things she had done in her desperation for motherhood. But for now, she could not bring herself to speak. And so, their joy turned to silence. Their first night as parents was shrouded not in laughter but in shadows, the child lying between them, a living question neither of them could yet answer. The night after the child's birth, the silence in the hospital room was heavy. The baby's strange cries filled the background. But Emmanuel's eyes never left Elizabeth. He sat stiffly on the edge of the bed, waiting. His chest rose and fell heavily, his hands trembling on his knees. Finally, Elizabeth turned her face toward him, her eyes swollen from weeping. She opened her mouth, but her voice cracked. "Emmanuel, there's something I must tell you." His gaze narrowed, his heart already fearing the worst. "Speak." She clutched the bedsheet tightly, her words spilling out in fragments. I was lonely when you traveled so often. You were avoiding me and I thought maybe you didn't want me anymore. I was desperate for a child, desperate for something to fill the emptiness. One night, I gave in. I slept with Bruno. My dog, he was having so much erection that time and his manhood was so big, so I have to give it a try. It was only once. I never knew it's going to lead to anything. But now, her words trailed off, her voice drowned in sobs. Emmanuel's shock. Emmanuel sat frozen. His whole body went cold, as though life had drained out of him. He stared at her, his mind unable to process the confession. You did what?" His voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of thunder. He rose slowly from the bed, pacing the room, his hands gripping his head. He could not bear to look at the baby, nor at his wife. Shame, betrayal, anger, and sorrow crashed against him all at once. "After everything, after all I endured, just once, you say? Just once? And you ruined us." She reached out weakly, tears flooding her face. "I didn't know it would lead to this. I didn't mean to betray you. I just wanted to be a mother. Please, forgive me." But Emmanuel could not hear her pleas. His chest heaved as he stared at the child in the cot, a child who carried his wife's shame and his deepest humiliation. The unbearable silence. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Elizabeth wept into her hands, trembling with regret, while Emmanuel stood by the window, lost in thoughts that brought him no peace. One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. The weeks after the baby's birth were filled with tears and silence. Elizabeth's heart shattered each time she looked at the child, and Emmanuel felt only betrayal. They tried to hold on, but the truth grew heavier with each passing day. One night, through sobs and silence, they faced it. "This child will destroy us," Emmanuel whispered. "We cannot carry this pain forever." Elizabeth knew he was right. Keeping the child meant keeping the wound open. Together, they made the painful choice to let go. The days that followed were filled with mourning, not just for the child, but for their lost innocence. As part of their healing, Elizabeth agreed to sell Bruno, the dog she had once clung to for comfort. Watching him leave broke her, but it was a step toward rebuilding trust. Healing intimacy. Determined to restore their bond, Emmanuel learned that intimacy was more than physical. With tenderness and patience, he focused on Elizabeth's pleasure, awakening a joy she had never known before. "You see," she whispered one night, resting on his chest, "my husband is enough for me." Seeking medical help. Time brought perspective, and with it renewed hope. This time, Elizabeth gently urged Emmanuel to seek professional advice. "Let's be sure we're both fine," she said, her voice calm but full of resolve. Reluctantly, he agreed. The results were sobering. Emmanuel's sperm count was low. It was the confirmation of a fear he had buried deep inside. But Elizabeth didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply took his hand and said, "We'll walk through this together." Encouraged by her strength, Emmanuel began treatment. With time, he noticed changes, subtle at first. His energy returned. His self-doubt began to lift. Their intimacy became less of a battlefield and more of a garden, something to nurture. For the first time, Elizabeth's eyes lit up after their time together, not from politeness, but genuine joy. A new beginning. Months passed, and then one morning, Elizabeth sat quietly on the edge of the bed, holding a pregnancy test in her hands. Positive. Her hands trembled as she told Emmanuel. His reaction was instant. Tears, laughter, gratitude. He fell to his knees and kissed her belly, whispering, "This time, it's our miracle." 9 months later, their son arrived, strong, healthy, his cry like a trumpet of victory. In the hospital room, Emmanuel held Elizabeth's hand, overwhelmed. "Thank you," he whispered again and again. "Thank you for believing in me, in us." Elizabeth cradled their son against her chest, tears of relief and joy mingling on her cheeks. The pain, the waiting, the near collapse of their marriage, all of it had led here, to this, coming home. Bringing their baby home transformed everything. The apartment, once heavy with silence and quiet tension, now echoed with coos, cries, and soft lullabies. Elizabeth sang old Igbo songs to soothe the baby, the same melodies her mother once sang to her. Emmanuel often watched from the doorway, his heart full, whispering silent prayers of thanks. Bruno, the dog who had once been her sole companion in loneliness, was long gone, sold during their healing. Now she had more than a companion, she had a family. Healing in marriage. The baby brought more than joy. He became a bridge between husband and wife. Gone were the unspoken resentments. In their place was teamwork. Emmanuel changed diapers without complaint. Elizabeth nursed late into the night, whispering softly to her child. Exhausting as it was, it drew them closer. One night, as their son finally slept, Elizabeth leaned into Emmanuel's arms. "I'm proud of you," she said. Those words broke something open in him, not with pain, but with healing. For so long he had feared he wasn't enough. Now he knew he was exactly what his family needed. Their intimacy deepened, not just physically, emotionally. The shame was gone. The fear had faded. They had learned to meet each other with tenderness, patience, and new understanding. What once had been duty was now desire, rediscovered in trust. A future of hope. Family and neighbors came to visit, cooing over the baby and offering prayers of thanksgiving. For the first time in years, Elizabeth welcomed the question, "When did you deliver?" With a proud smile. No more shame, no more excuses. Emmanuel stood taller too. The weight that once bowed his shoulders had lifted. Fatherhood didn't just give him a child, it gave him confidence, clarity, purpose. He held his son close and whispered promises into his tiny ears. Promises to be the kind of father he never had, to raise him with love and strength. They began to dream again. Of more children, of a bigger home, of a future filled with laughter and light. The scars of the past remained, but now, they were only reminders of what they had survived. What defined them was no longer pain or failure, but the peace that had come at last, and the little heartbeat asleep in the next room. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, share with friends, and subscribe for more amazing stories.